The hum of the old desk lamp was the only sound left in the room. It was past midnight, and the streets outside were silent, except for the faint whir of a sewing machine coming from a small apartment window. Inside sat Sarah Miller, a tired woman in her early 40s, her shoulders slumped, her eyes red from lack of sleep. Her hands moved over the fabric with practiced precision, even though the skin on her fingers had long since hardened from years of work. She stitched quietly, whispering a prayer that her teenage son, asleep in the next room, would never have to live the life she did, the kind of life where dreams get pushed aside for survival. If you believe in kindness, sacrifice, and second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe, because sometimes, even the smallest act of love can change everything. Sarah hadn't always been this tired. Once, she was a dreamer, a woman who believed that life would reward hard work and honesty. But life had other plans. When her husband left unexpectedly, taking what little savings they had, Sarah was left with nothing but a rented apartment, a stack of bills, and a 10-year-old boy named Ethan who still believed in her. She took any job she could find. During the day, she cleaned offices downtown. At night, she worked from her living room, sewing clothes for neighbors who paid her just enough to keep the lights on. Her hands were always sore, her back always aching, but she never complained. Ethan was the reason. She'd peek into his room late at night and see him asleep over his textbooks, still in his worn-out hoodie, the glow of his old laptop flickering on his face. He wanted to be an engineer, not for fame or money, but because he wanted to build something that mattered. Every time Sarah looked at him, she felt both pride and fear. Pride because he had such a pure heart. Fear because she knew how expensive dreams could be. Bills piled up faster than her paychecks. There were days she skipped dinner so Ethan could have lunch money. She'd patch up her old shoes with tape instead of buying new ones. When people asked how she managed, she'd just smile and say, "Mothers always find a way." But sometimes, when she was alone, she'd cry quietly at her sewing table. Winter was always the hardest. The cold crept through the thin walls, and Sarah's fingers would stiffen as she worked. But she'd keep going, stitch after stitch, humming softly to herself while snow fell outside. Every night, Ethan would come out of his room and say, "Mom, you should sleep." And she'd reply with the same gentle smile, "I'll rest when you've made it, sweetheart." Years passed. Ethan graduated high school at the top of his class. He got accepted into a prestigious university, something no one in their family had ever achieved. When the acceptance letter came, Sarah cried so hard she couldn't even finish reading it. But joy came with fear. The tuition was more than she made in an entire year. Scholarships covered part of it, but not enough. She sat by the window that night, staring out at the snow, and made a decision that would change her life. She picked up another job, cleaning at a grocery store overnight. It meant she'd sleep just 2 hours a day. It meant her body would ache in ways she'd never known. But when she thought of Ethan's dreams, her exhaustion became fuel. The following years were brutal. Sarah lived in a constant rhythm of motion: wake up, work, sew, clean, repeat. Her hands trembled from fatigue, and her eyesight began to blur. But every phone call from Ethan made it worth it. He'd tell her about his classes, his professors, his projects, and always end with, "Mom, one day I'll make it all up to you." And she'd always reply, "I don't need anything, baby. Just make me proud." She never told him that sometimes she fainted from exhaustion. Or that she had to choose between paying the electric bill and buying groceries. She didn't want him to worry. She wanted his focus to stay on his future, not her struggles. When Ethan graduated, Sarah watched the ceremony online from her old laptop. The moment they called his name, she burst into tears. She clapped from her living room as if she were sitting in the front row. Her son had made it. After that, Ethan got a job offer from a tech company in California. He promised he'd visit soon, that he'd take care of her. Sarah believed him, because she always had. But months went by. Then a year. The calls became less frequent. She told herself he was just busy adjusting to his new life. But the truth was, her heart ached in silence. Every night, she'd still turn on the lamp by the window, the same one she'd worked under for years, just in case Ethan came home late and needed to see the light on. Then, one spring morning, there was a knock at her door. Sarah shuffled to open it, expecting a neighbor or a mailman, and froze. There he was. Ethan, now 28, standing in the doorway in a perfectly tailored gray suit, holding a bouquet of her favorite lilies. His eyes were the same, warm, kind, full of love. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Her hand trembled as she reached out to touch his face, just to make sure he was real. Then she pulled him into her arms and cried like a child. Ethan held her tight. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm sorry it took me so long. But I wanted to come back when I could give you the life you always deserved." He led her outside, into a brand new car parked by the curb. "Where are we going?" she asked through tears. "You'll see," he said with a smile. After an hour's drive, they pulled into a quiet neighborhood. The car stopped in front of a cozy, white-painted house with a porch and a small garden full of daisies. Sarah stared at it in confusion. "Whose house is this?" Ethan took her hand. "Yours, Mom. Everything you see, it's yours." She gasped, her hand covering her mouth as tears streamed down her face. "I bought this for you," he continued softly. "You've worked your whole life taking care of me. Now it's my turn." He helped her inside. The living room was bright and warm, sunlight flooding through big windows. On the table sat framed photos of her and Ethan through the years, pictures he had secretly saved and restored. Sarah walked through the hallway in disbelief. Every room smelled of fresh paint and hope. But then Ethan stopped her in front of one door. "There's one more thing," he said. He opened the door. Inside was a small workshop, lined with brand new sewing machines, shelves of colorful fabric, and a big sign above the wall that read, "Sarah's Stitch of Hope." Ethan smiled. "I know how much you loved sewing, Mom. So I started this small business in your name. You'll run it, and you'll hire women who need a second chance, just like you once did." Sarah broke down completely. She covered her face and sobbed, shaking her head in disbelief. Ethan knelt beside her, holding her hands. "You taught me that hard work and love can build anything. This is my way of giving that love back to you." From that day forward, Sarah's life changed completely. The woman who once worked 3 jobs now spent her mornings teaching others how to sew, and her afternoons sitting on her porch, watching the sunset with peace in her heart. Neighbors who used to pity her now came by just to see her smile. Ethan visited often, and every time he did, he'd find her surrounded by laughter and warmth, the kind she'd once sacrificed so he could have his chance. Sometimes, Sarah would glance at the old lamp she'd brought from the apartment and whisper, "We made it, didn't we?" If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Every story we tell honors those who never stop giving, even when no one's watching. And before you go, comment below what lesson you took from Sarah's journey. And maybe, dedicate a few words to someone in your life who never gave up on you. Because sometimes, love isn't loud or flashy. It's the sound of a tired mother sewing late into the night, quietly building a better tomorrow for someone else.